Hello and welcome to Sticky Hopebox Soapbox Podcast. I go by B as in your bestie in the Hope Department, and I'm so glad you're here. This bonus Part 2 episode is a little different in structure than other episodes have been so far. It features pieces of my interview with Will, who we met in episode 3. As Will and I were talking about his past experiences with grief, I realized we both had the experience of grieving our friend Bree, who died at the age of 28 very unexpectedly. Last month marked 11 years since her passing.
Something was off. Something was not off. Something was missing. Something was missing. And this is something that happens in theater a lot when we lose someone in theater because we spend so much time together. I mean, we're talking about 77-hour weeks,
For years.
Yeah, but owning that happened, and I want to say controlling the narrative, but controlling the narrative in my mind of, instead of focusing on it was so sudden, it was so short, I focus on the time that I had, the experiences, the things, all those good things.
This episode tells the story of how Bree touched our lives, how we've grieved her over the years, what has helped, and how we continue to carry her spirit with us today. We don't just talk about loss, we talk about what it means to live with it. It's layered with love, grief, laughter, meaning, and how Bree continues to echo through our work and the people we meet. And we invite you to do that with us. We also send love to everyone who worked with her, loved her, and was touched by her for even a moment. Please be gentle with yourselves as you listen to this episode. There are resources listed in the description below. Sometimes the universe leaves you breadcrumbs, maybe a trail of signs or a full-blown cacophony of coincidences, and they're just too loud to ignore. If you are familiar with Matilda the musical, the song Quiet was a great representation of how I felt these last couple of weeks. And I realized I needed to take much more time, space, and support than I had initially thought. I've learned that taking time to sit with and move through is okay, instead of numbing or shaming myself. Thank you for your patience and checking in. Quick but important note, this podcast is for pure connection, not professional care, and it discusses topics that may be sensitive to listeners. Discretion is advised. This space welcomes varied experiences and opinions, but will always remain rooted in kindness. A gentle reminder that this podcast does not provide medical, legal, financial, nutritional, spiritual, or therapeutic advice. Always consult your trusted professionals for guidance. And if you or someone you love is in crisis, please call or text 988 or go to your nearest emergency room. This week, we are reintroduced to Will to highlight our conversation about our friend Bree, who the majority of this episode will be about. Will is a veteran, author, mental health advocate, and dad of 4, including 2 energetic 8-year-old twins. He's also a fellow griever who knows what it means to keep going. I will also mention a former mentor and friend, 2-time Tony Award nominee and Webby Award winner, Lindsay Jones, throughout this episode, as he is weirdly cosmically connected in all of this, and gave me an unexpected opportunity, which he didn't know about, to heal a part of myself in this last month. When you are grieving someone, sometimes it feels more like signs from loved ones instead of coincidences. I hope I've been able to weave the cosmic connectivity throughout this interview, which has taken many twists and turns since talking to Will to get to where we are now. I'm really happy you're here. Let's get into it. Will is a biracial black man rocking a black t-shirt and, unfortunately, a band-aid under his eye, thanks to a recent bee sting. We are on a video call, and he is sitting in a chair with a white wall behind him and a painting in the background with blue in it. Will and I met 15 years ago in 2010, working in live theater, backstage in dimly lit wings, wrangling props, and taking cues, sometimes in costume, sometimes in chaos. We were crew members for 3 years, alongside one of the most unforgettable people in our lives, who was our friend and we loved dearly. Her name was Bree. Bree was from Minnesota. She loved and was very good at playing hockey. She was a fierce and deceivingly strong and commanding carpenter and deck chief. Bree was a white woman with long dark hair, small in stature, but one of the strongest people both physically and mentally I've ever met. She wore all black with us when running shows, and usually jeans and a cute top or tees off the clock. She was always cool. It didn't matter what she wore. I met Brie in 2010. This was a few months before we started working together at the same theater company, a few months before meeting Will, and 1 year after my mom died. The theater company had 3 spaces for productions, and the biggest one was where Brie and I would work on 10 large shows together. However, before that, my first 2 shows at the company were in the more intimate spaces, where I assisted with soundboard operation and scene changes. A show called Private Lives would be the only time Brie saw me doing scene changes without her. And I'm grateful that not only was she kind and complimentary in person, but also on social media, because now I get to look at her words when it's sometimes hard to hear her voice again. I then gave her compliments right back on her significant scene change happening at the theater next door at the same time with the production of Glass Menagerie. Both Private Lives and Glass Menagerie were sound designed and composed by none other than Lindsay Jones. This was the second show Lindsay and I worked on together, but not the last. The first of 10 shows Brie and I worked together, we were each put into a newsy-type outfit and got to shoot 10 rounds of blanks backstage in support of a large gunfight happening on stage for a production of All the King's Men. It was epic. The second show Brie and I worked on was The Good Doctor, and this is where Will enters the scene. It was the first show Brie, Will, and I worked on together, and it was quite a memorable experience.
The time she ran up on that doctor chair to save the one actor, so it leaves back. Neil was like, "Will, we want you to do that now, not him. Take him off of that." Oh man, that was epic. It was so many great times.
Unfortunately for her, at least out of the 10 shows we worked together, the only one we worked on that was musical-like was Threepenny Opera, which was maybe the most unhinged show, in a good way. We had so much fun. When I wasn't working on crew with her, I was running sound. I always let the crew pick from a list of sound check songs. I loved when she really got into it and danced and sang on stage. Brie was our friend, our teammate, and whether she knew it or not, a lifeline for both of us during some of our darkest times. While working together, we often talked out on the dock during breaks. We processed a lot together. When we weren't working on shows, Brie and I were going on double dates, brunches, nights out with the crew, reading books, and then going to see the movie, and driving in her car listening to musicals, which at the time was the only time I listened to musicals. I didn't know I could find musicals I liked yet, but she loved them and introduced me to quite a few. The last show we all worked on together was Hamlet in March of 2013, featuring black astroturf throughout the set. Brie and I got to light torches every night to hand to actors coming through a trap door. We had dance parties backstage, and guess who sound designed and composed it? Yep, Lindsay Jones. This would be the 3rd time working with him, but the first time I was strictly on the run crew and not on his sound team for a show. It was an incredible soundscape.
Being really quiet doing it. Push-ups. Really quiet push-ups. The dance parties while the Hamlet is going across stage. People don't know the stuff that we did back there. The stuff we do backstage. It's like, unless you're a part of the crew, you just don't know. You're not a part of it,
Yeah, we did a few push-ups to prepare for the cinema. 2 months later, in May of 2013, Brie and her soon-to-be husband were about to get married and leave to work on Ghost the Musical's tour. My partner and I were moving to Indiana to be closer to his family, where I had just received news that I would have theater work at a professional company shortly after we arrived. As we were all packing on May 13th, my dad died unexpectedly, and I left, not getting to say goodbye or celebrate anyone's future journeys. However, 10 months later, just 2 months before she died, Brie and her husband came to Indiana on tour with Ghost. I had the privilege of seeing her work her magic on and off stage one last time, and this time in a musical, Her Dream. It was her husband's birthday, so we got to have one last double date, one last night out celebrating the person she loved, and one last adventure day in her car listening to musicals. Cupcakes in tow for the cast, crew, and her beloved. It could not have been more perfect. She died just 2 months later at the age of 28. She was on a short break from working the tour after celebrating her first wedding anniversary. She was living her dream, and everyone was in shock. Early grief was messy and almost felt unbearable for me. She helped me grieve when I lost my mom, and then my dad from afar. And then 1 year later, we lost her. After my third unexpected death in 5 years, it began to unravel me, even more than I had experienced before. It felt like every last ounce of strength I had in me was evaporating. My drinking escalated. I lost myself. I was losing hope. Eventually, over the years, I found my way into therapy, then support groups and sobriety from alcohol, leading me here 12 years later to healing and in a conversation with someone who has had a different journey. I'm actually curious, based on what I learned from you today, about how you felt like the root of a lot of your pain was from the grief early on, and that you finally learned how to grieve in therapy, how that looked for you with Brie. Like, were you already in that journey?
So I had just finished 4.5 years prior to that of consistent therapy. But it was the first loss that I experienced after my therapist was like, we're going to go on a monthly or a couple month basis. She became my mentor. So it was like my first experience on my own with a loss. It was a little hard because I have not been able to go back there. Like that last show that I worked, it just didn't feel the same. And you were gone, she was gone, and it was just, something was off. Something was not off, something was missing. Something was missing. And this is something that happens in theater a lot when we lose someone in theater because we spend so much time together. I mean, we're talking about 77-hour weeks,
For years.
Yeah, but owning that happened, and I want to say controlling the narrative, but controlling the narrative in my mind of, instead of focusing on it was so sudden, it was so short, I focus on the time that I had, the experiences, the things, all those good things. Understand that the more time that I spend not accepting it, the less time I have remembering the good things and the good times. Because I'm so focused on that hurt and that pain that I'm not focusing on the joy and remembering the life that you live. All the little funny sayings and the little things that we used to do backstage. With that, what I said about owning and accepting it has helped move forward.
So fast forward to what is usually my final editing day. I take a break, hop on social media, and see that Lindsay Jones is offering tickets to a final dress rehearsal of Hamlet, where I am currently living in LA. Without putting two and two together, I immediately responded, I would love to go. I had recently gone through and washed all the old t-shirts from the theater, dance, and concerts that I worked for over 15 years to make them into a quilt, or 5. And the only show shirt I have from that company we worked for is Hamlet, and I have no idea why. But I put on that 12-year-old t-shirt, threw a blazer over it, and went to the show. Without knowing anything going in, it hit me halfway through the production that Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, was being played by Gina Torres from the TV show Firefly, a show I used to gush about with Brie. It was a little surreal, with literal and metaphorical ghosts popping up all over the place, even memories from our production. The cast and creatives are exceptional, and it was an incredible and inventive production. It was so good to see Lindsay after so many years, and I was wildly grateful for the opportunity. If you remember, I'd already recorded with Will when Lindsay's post came into the picture. At the end of the interview, I asked Will, before we head out, I wanted to ask if there's anything else that you wanted to share with our audience for this first...
Live long and prosper.
The first show Lindsay and I worked on was in 2010 in Baltimore, Maryland. It was less than a year before meeting Brie and Will. It was a show called Let There Be Love, a play about assisted suicide that I was running sound for just 5 months after losing my mom to suicide. His sound design and composition was gorgeous. The show was intense, beautiful, and an unforgettable production. The cast was amazing and included the legendary Avery Brooks, known to some as Captain Sisko in Star Trek's Deep Space Nine. Captain Sisko never says live long and prosper, but as I understand his arc, it's about grief and new beginnings. And that felt like a fitting end to an interview and a fitting full circle moment for myself. Will had no idea I had worked with Avery Brooks, much less that Lindsay had worked on these productions that connected us all across time, music, and grief. It all just felt a little too on the nose. Maybe it's a coincidence, or perhaps it's something more. I usually share amazing photos from that time every year, and I'll be sharing them on social media later this week. Not only did Brie get me to explore musicals I would enjoy, she also recommended fictional books I might like. I have always preferred autobiographies and documentaries, but she grew to know me, and the first book she introduced me to was Hunger Games. We got to see the first movie together, and I made her a failed attempt at a catching fire cake for her 27th birthday. Today's sticky note is a quote from the book Hunger Games. Hope is the only thing stronger than fear, meaning hope can fuel resistance. How do you keep a loved one's memory alive? I've never told anyone this, but I probably listened to Ghost the Musical soundtrack 1,000 times in the years following Brie's death. It became kind of a strange soundtrack to my grief. The overture carried my heartbreak, Another Day helped carry my hope. Even after all this time, she's still here. In the songs, the silence, and the unexpected overlaps in life. I referenced 2 musicals in this episode, and I think she would have loved that. Grief doesn't fade. It doesn't finish. It settles into us like sediment, becoming part of our foundation. It will come in waves throughout our whole lives for someone or something we loved. Sometimes, all we can do is remember out loud so we can keep that person's memory alive. And Brie, if you can hear us, we all miss you so much, dear friend, and the world has never been the same. Please know that your memory and laughter are not forgotten. The link to Brie's Memorial Fund is listed in the description below. If you also made it through a tough couple of weeks, I hope you're proud of and can be gentle with yourself too. The world is in a lot of pain right now. I encourage you all to be gentle and kind to yourselves and to each other. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, leave a review if it helped, follow along on socials for videos and more from the interviews. Until next time, take care, love. You are not alone.